Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the OSMARI project. And in today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing a personal trainer. Unfortunately, we did have some technical difficulties toward the end, so it's going to be an abrupt cutoff of the interview. However, we are going to have a part two for this interview, and we're going to actually dig a little deeper with this particular visitor for the OSMARI project. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoyed the interview. Hey everybody, welcome to the Asmari Project, episode 4. Today I have Craig. So Craig, please introduce yourself and what you do.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Craig Adams. I'm a personal trainer and online coach. So I basically work with a lot of people on their fitness, their nutrition, lifestyle habits. And it's primarily a lot of men. Actually, I work with a lot of men, but I do have some female clients as well. Tend to be those sort of busy professional type that, don't really have a lot of time to spend on their own. And they need a little bit of guidance, along the way.
And I guess the question is, well, you mentioned a portion of your demographics. So can you go into a little bit more detail? Because I've seen what you've written in your
Sure.
profile and such. So can you expand on the demographics of people that you train on?
Yeah. So at this point, I have some in-person clients I still see because that's been my business for the last 17 years. Primarily has been working online or in person. And then about 5 years ago, I started introducing online. And then online, I thought I wanted to start focusing primarily on men. Now, men doesn't necessarily have to have a particular age group, but I'm coming up on 40, and I try and work with men my age and a little bit older, mainly because I understand where they're at in their life, right? Like they tend to be busy. They got bigger jobs than they have when they're 25. They might have a wife. They might have a husband. They might have kids. They've got these extra stresses that have sort of taken them away from where they used to be when they were younger. So at this point, it's sort of like my little motto. What I go for is I want to help guys lose fat, get stronger, while still having some drinks with the guys. And I think, and the reason that's my sort of my mandate is I put that in there, even though I'm not a drinker myself, as I told you before. Like, I put that in there because a lot of people can believe it's either all in or all out. And I think for like a regular person who's working, they need to understand that there's an ebb and flow to this, and that there needs to be some enjoyment, and there still needs to be some social and some entertainment that comes with it. And so it's trying to help people learn, like, how can I get to my goals while still actually enjoying some time with my wife or some time with my friends. But how do I do it strategically so that it's not damaging as I try and
Mhm.
progress?
Yeah, and I kind of understand that when well, first of all, I'm single. I'm not married, no kids, and I'm actually over 40. I'm 41, turning 42, and essentially, I have the luxury of not having bad influences as coming from a significant other or the children's dietary needs and all that stuff. So I know that that can be quite difficult. And my mom lives in this house too. I bought this big house for only 2 people just so we each have our privacy. But essentially I have the luxury where I'm still eating healthy, but it's like only
Yeah.
one meal a week where I go absolutely crazy. I'll tell you about my cheat meal later. I actually bought it for tomorrow. But when it comes to like the kids and the wife, I would imagine, or the husband, I would imagine that that puts I guess an obstacle when it comes to the dietary requirements in order to obtain optimal nutrition and fitness. So can you kind of expand upon that a little bit and what you've encountered as a trainer?
Sure. Yeah. The thing I tend to encounter the most is that the impact of the partner and the impact of the kids is quite high. And generally it's because to be fair, I think generally it's quite high because nobody wants to be making 2 3 meals for everybody to sit down at the same time, right? So you have to look at it from a perspective of like sitting down as a family or as a couple. And whoever is the meal creator that day, they don't want to have to make a separate meal for their husband or their partner. And so I understand that aspect of it. The unfortunate reality that comes with that is that not everybody's body obviously sort of fits along the same dietary needs and dietary requirements, and then obviously not everybody's goals fit to the same dietary requirements as well. And this is why, like, when I'm working with men, a lot of the men I work with, they don't tend to be the primary food maker in the house, and it's a difficult conversation to approach their partner to say, like, I need to make a change. I need your assistance in this period, in this matter, and I'm sorry that it might create a little more work for us. But like it's and I believe that can be difficult for either sex to disclose, I believe, but I do really think it's hard for a lot of men. They come home from work, they've been away from the family for a long time, and it can be difficult for them to say like, "Hey, honey, I need something different." And so that's something I try to address with a lot of people because I do have a wife, I do have children myself. We luckily eat quite healthy as a whole, as a family. There are certain ways that I eat that are different than my kids, for example, and that's because like we still want them to enjoy some ice cream, or they're going to have brownies when it's brownie time. Whereas I'm not going to participate in that. And what we basically do then as a family, because I have an understanding wife and great kids, is that they can just understand like, hey, daddy doesn't eat that, but that's okay. Like I'm glad that you're eating. I'm glad you're enjoying it. And I know that we're getting kind of esoteric here, but I say that because it's very difficult for a lot of people to separate themselves from it's okay if you don't participate. You can still enjoy the enjoyment of others participating in it, and that your presence is what's most important in that matter, and not your consumption of the food or the drink.
So let me ask you this question about your kids. So have your kids enjoyed any sort of sweets or treats that they really, really enjoy? Like you mentioned brownies or ice cream or whatever. And
Yeah.
they try to give you a piece of it and you said no. And then they give you that sort of sad pouty face that you don't love them anymore or something like that. I think that's a question I'd like to have the answer to.
I think that's a common fear. That's actually a good way to put it. That's never
Mhm.
happened. And I say it's never happened because to sort of further this along, I believe part of the problem in a lot of families can be that there's no conversation around food and what it means to each
Mhm.
other. And so for me, because I eat very different, from the second that my kids, could start to understand some semblance of
Right.
logic, as they got older, it was saying to them like, hey, so daddy doesn't eat this way, but it doesn't mean that it's bad to eat that way, to try and educate them. So when they do have a cookie, they might say to me like, oh, dad, if you could have this cookie, you'd really
Mhm.
like it. And I say like, that's great. I probably would. And I think that it comes back to the emotional side of the father in this case that we're talking about, being able to talk to your children, talk through to your children, to explain to them like, hey, it's okay that I'm not
Mhm.
participating, right? You giving me a gift and me having to turn it down is nothing other than it's not for daddy today, or it's not for daddy right now,
A- And
and
it,
some people probably have that happen to
and
them
it's a
though.
good lesson for them, a secondary lesson, if you will, kind of teaching them that you don't always get what you want. So you want daddy to have the
Yeah,
cookie, he doesn't want it. So you don't always get everything that you want. So it's a nice little
sure.
lesson in that. And I, I guess I want to ask about, if you don't mind me getting personal, with your family dynamic when it comes to eating. So, do you all eat together? And do you follow? Do you all have the same meals together, or minus the little treats that you just talked about?
Sure, that's a great question, and I think it's a great question because we actually eat very few meals where I'm eating at the same time as them. So my children, my wife, as you can imagine, they eat breakfast, lunch, dinner. They probably have a couple snacks during the day, like regular folks. I tend to eat on a little more frequent, intake pattern, and I tend to eat a lot more food. So it's not necessarily always gonna be the same food as them. But like a sort of traditional family, I make sure that at lunchtime, because I'll explain how I can be here at lunch, but at lunchtime, I'll sit down with my kids. They'll eat their lunch, and they're eating their lunch with me, even though I'm not eating. And then supper time, we sit down as a whole family, and I'll be present as well. And again, it's coming back to when we do that. The kids are now aware because they're older and they obviously have grown up a little bit. But I know for the people who are looking for help out there, the idea is like there's nothing wrong with you not consuming the food at the same time. But you need to explain to them why that's happening. And if you can do that, kids are way brighter than we give them credit for often. And so for us, like I don't eat the same meal as them almost every single day, but that doesn't mean that we don't spend meal time
Right.
together.
And I could give you a little perspective from a different point of view. I grew up in an immigrant household. And basically, when my parents and I, when we came here, we started from nothing. I mean, my parents both worked all the time, and I had babysitters, daycare, and all that stuff. And to the point where my parents got divorced when I was fairly young, but I was living with my mom, And my mom was working a lot. My mom was working 2 jobs, going to school, raising me. And it was just normal for us not to eat together. We ate when we could. And essentially what she would do is, well, I didn't eat during the school day, but she would come home during her lunch. She would make a meal for me, set it on top of the stove, and just let it sit there. When I come home, put it on the plate, put it in the microwave, and I would eat something. And that's kind of how we worked and how we functioned. So the family dynamic where you sit together and eat all the time, I don't think it's necessarily required. But it's kind of like a bonus, it's nice quality time. However, it's not really realistic in a lot of different families because people have things to do. So it's just something to be considerate about.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? And your mom demonstrated her love and care for
Right.
you by making that meal at
Right.
lunchtime. And even though you might have been young, and you wouldn't interpret that as that, you wouldn't interpret it as mom demonstrating love when you're young. But you know that now. You can look back and go, she gave me the love I needed at mealtime by coming home at her time and
Right.
prepping. And I think that when I'm speaking to people who are either just have a wife or husband or they have kids, is that they need to step back and take a grander view of what mealtime means, what meals mean, versus how am I expressing love through this connection with food and the events
Right,
around food.
absolutely. And again, I mean that as I mentioned, we didn't have that much money growing up, so we did what we could when it came to nutrition. And unfortunately, when I was younger, we didn't really have that luxury of healthy eating, because it's cheaper to eat foods that aren't, I guess, well balanced, if you will. It was balanced, but not as well balanced as I would have liked, knowing what I know now. But we did what we could, and we made it work. But it's good that at least one person in your household has the knowledge that you have in order to assist in allowing the kids to have what they want to have, but still maintaining, I guess, somewhat of a well-balanced nutrition.
Yeah, because like we're not here to restrict our kids from enjoying some of the frivolities of
Hmm.
youth, right? But my job is to ensure and teach them that they understand that like treats are treats for a
Hmm.
reason, and if you eat them every day, they're no longer
Right.
treats, right? They now just become a staple in your diet, and so you can't do that when your kid's 2 or 3. There are certain times you have to say like no, like we're not having that tonight, or no. But as they get older, you can explain to them, and they learn very quickly that you're right. If I do have ice cream every single day, kind of my belly starts to hurt
Right.
sometimes. Or if I do, or if I do have brownies a few days in a row, by the end it's not as
Right.
special, right? Because kids use words like special like that, and I think for us as adults, we start to interpret things like there's a term that I like and I hate, which is when people say everything in
Hmm.
moderation, right? Oh, everything in moderation and you'll be
Right.
just fine. And I often say to people, well, that was true when my grandmother was young because my grandma probably got to eat a pie once every 3 weeks. It was
Hmm.
1937. There would not have been access to pies necessarily every single day. But now when we say everything in moderation, we buy a pie and then we have one piece of pie for 6 consecutive
Hmm.
days. And you go, like, that's not moderation in any way, any shape or form. And so that to me is the what I'm trying to help my kids navigate. And I'm trying to help my wife, my friends, my clients, of course, I'm trying to help them navigate the idea that, like, hey, at one point, everything in moderation was true. But we have to realize that moderation has changed because we live in such a world of food
Yeah.
abundance. You and I, we're very lucky people, right? The people who are watching this, the people who are my clients, they're incredibly fortunate
Right.
people, which means we live in a world of abundance and we need to find a way to get back into a bit of a smaller box so we can control
And where
ourselves.
we live in, I mean, in the West, where it's a lot of processed foods and mass production and a lot of things that we do have to take into consideration, which aren't in other parts of the world. With respect to I always think about I have family in Germany, and when I compare how they eat there to how Americans eat, it is apples to oranges. It is so different. I mean, fruits, vegetables, well portioned. I mean, even their school lunches. I mean, it was fantastic. And here, it's, I'm not even going to talk about the school lunches in the U.S., but I'm sure you're aware, and I'm sure that people who are listening to this are aware. They are very, very much processed. So, even though we live in this, and I'm grateful for living here, but it has its items that we need to keep an eye on when it comes
Yeah.
to what to watch out for. And luckily we have that sort of knowledge, or I've at least gained some more knowledge in the last 5 years in that respect. And I guess the next question is, and you have a wife, so is she as fit as you? Is she as knowledgeable as you as it comes to fitness and health and nutrition?
Yeah. So it's very interesting you say that. So my wife is very fit in terms of she eats like a champ. She eats very, very clean. She's not an overeater. Like she has all of those characteristics. But what is, I think, funny is she exercises not at all. No exercise, right? And I'm constantly like babe, like you look great. Like imagine, but like she has some stresses. She has things that do prevent her not from doing it, but from taking that extra step to getting back into it. She used to exercise years ago when we were young, no kids, easier jobs, those types of things. But luckily, she, shortly after we got together, she was sort of a non-nutrition person before, just your regular Joe eating. And then when we got together, she just started picking up bit by bit and making a little bit of changes on her own, like not through my guidance or direction. And she started to notice, like, oh, I feel better in this way, or I'm the acne on my back is going away, like things that can become noticeable outside of the sphere of having to lose weight. And then as we move forward and we've progressed, and now here we are, we're together for almost 20 years now. Well, in those 20 years, like we were actually speaking last night, which is hilarious. We're talking about it today. I was saying last night, I was like, do you remember, like when you would have a bowl of cereal before bedtime, and now like that would never cross her mind. And that's because of that growth and progression and knowledge that she's gained. And now I'm constantly picking at her to try and get her back in the gym, but in time it will happen. And that's what I speak about in a lot of my videos or in a lot of the things that I write. I'm trying to say to people, it's about taking these small steps to try and move forward. It's not always about these giant leaps that have to occur. So when she gets on the treadmill randomly and does a run on the treadmill in the house, like I'm happy for that, because one of these days she's going to run on the treadmill and it's going to catch, and then she'll be on it the next day or 2 days later. And so I think that some people, to come back to the all or nothing attitude, some people need to cut themselves a little bit of slack and realize that, hey, like one time on the treadmill, even in a month, is better than zero, and hope that one becomes two and two becomes five.
There was
Yeah. So that's my wife.
there was another influencer that I had a conversation with yesterday, and I saw some of his stuff, but he had a paper towel analogy where you rip off one paper towel and you accomplish this, but the whole roll looks the same. But you keep on tearing through that paper towel roll for each fitness task or each nutritional task that you accomplish, and it will still look the same, but it will gradually get smaller, better and better, and slimmer. So that's kind of like the analogy that you're kind of portraying as well, which I agree with. And trust me, it's almost 2 years since I started working out again. I started working out again a few months before I turned 40. And I've said this in another episode of the podcast, because my mom called me a fat ass, and that's what motivated that's what motivated me, and we had that sort of relationship. Yep. And I always say that if people love you, they'll always tell you the truth, no matter how blunt it is, and that's how I prefer it. But yeah, she called me a fat ass, and then I got a trainer, and now I've been working with two different trainers these past 2 years, but now one of them has become a friend, where I go to the gym with him in the morning at the ass crack of dawn. Today I woke up at 4, and I'm not a morning person at all. And today we did an incline treadmill workout for like 20-25 minutes, and then we did arms, and I think we did arms today. And we kind of blasted them really, really hard, to the point where I couldn't do anything anymore. So I'm the type of person where I can't work out by myself,
Mm,
because if I work out by myself, I'm the type that thinks a lot about various other things. With me, with my friend and I mean, we just do it, and we just have offensive conversations throughout the time that we're there, and just have a blast. So I
yeah.
think that's sort of like the atmosphere that I like working in, especially since he knows what he's doing, and I'm kind of shadowing him. And I kind of
Mm,
imagine myself, people ask me when I'm going to date or when I'm going to start seeing people again, or what have you. I personally feel like I need to date somebody who's a complete opposite of me. I'm more of an academic intellectual, but somebody who's an artist, but who's also very, very fitness focused, because that will sort of
yeah.
push me and maintain that sort of direction that I want to maintain, because I think that's very, very important. Because if I was by myself and just having to do it by myself, I don't think I would enjoy it as much as I do it with my friend.
I understand that. I really understand that. For some people, it's the camaraderie. For some people, it's you need that other person there as a motivator, as an accountability partner. Obviously, and then when you're there, you're having fun. And if you're having fun, we could be talking about going getting groceries or going to the gym. If you're having fun, you're going to want to do it. Like that's really what it comes down to. And so I love that you're doing that. Like, and if that's your method, do it, man. Stick with it,
Yeah,
right?
and again, like I said, I'm not a morning person, but he stopped. He was a personal trainer. He was a freelance personal trainer, but then he started teaching. So he teaches
Okay.
elementary school. So now he has a regular job. So the only time that he can really do it is early in the morning, and then he also has a wife and he has two stepkids that he deals with. I guess that's the right word. I don't know what else to call it. That he has, and they take care of each other and spend time together and all that good stuff. But that's the only time that he has available. So I tweaked and sucked it up to the point where I'm waking up in a not so great mood, and takes me about 40-45 minutes to actually get up. but but
Yeah.
but doing it in the morning. And I guess I want to ask you this question, because you mentioned the age thing before, and I kind of want to bring it back to that. So let's take out the family dynamic aspect of it. So let's say, all things being equal, say all the men are single, no children,
Yeah.
nothing. Um, and I guess I want to at least pick your brain on, what do people in their 40s or 50s have to do in comparison to people in their 20s? Like, what are the pros and cons, and what needs to be done, and how should they do it? What should they address? What to look for when it comes to training? And what have you encountered?
Sure. The best sort of analogy I can start off with is like when you're in your 20s, it's 1967 and you're a Corvette, right? So that thing is fresh, it is fast, it is powerful, and you can put it away wet, it doesn't matter. When you're in your 50s, it's 1997 and you're a 1967 Corvette. Engine's the same. It has the capability, but it requires more input, right? It requires harder work. It might require better oil. Maybe now you're putting premium gas into it. When you put it away, you better wipe that thing down. It better be ready to go, because it's going to take a lot more work to fix it up. And I think that's where a lot of people, they become mistaken. They remember being 20. They remember what they did in their 20s. And they're like, oh, yeah, when I was 20 years old, I did this and that and so on. And I'm like, that is awesome. Like, that is really great that you had that experience. But now that you're 50, or now that you're 47 years old, I don't really care what happened when you were 27. Like, I'm glad to know it. And if you had injuries, of course, I want to know it. But when you're 47 years old, you can go in, you can still kick some serious ass, right? But you have to know how to rest better, recover better, relax better, probably stretch better, eat better, all of these inputs that are going to allow you to go back the next day and not feel mangled, right? And so that's number one. The biggest difference is when you're younger, you can pretty much get away with no sleep, be slamming the booze, have a great workout the next day. You put into that 47, 50, 60 range, that deteriorates quite quickly. The second you have some booze, bad sleep, you hit the gym, and before you know it, you either have an injury or you're down with a cold. because your body just can't handle that pressure. So number one, it's almost like you need a holistic overview when you're a little bit older to ensure that you can have those great, powerful, intense workouts without it actually deteriorate or being deleterious to your body or to your makeup, you know. But a lot of people that I see right from the jump, they say things to me like, "Well, I'm 45 now. I guess I," and I'm like, I'm often at that point, I'm like, there's no I can't. It's that you can, but we have to do it in the right way, the right sequence, right? We need to lay the right foundation again so that you can progress. And so I've had clients, I have a couple clients. One client actually, I'll give you, he's older than that. When I started training him, he was 60. And so now he's 76 years old. Okay. So when he was 60, retiring lawyer, so a very busy job, never really had been active in terms of any sort of resistance training and so on and so forth. And so I was like, okay, let's start it out. At 76 years old, he's doing the same or more weight in some exercises because he's been able to increase his strength through the years and then we've been able to maintain it. That's important, number one. But number two, like we're making adjustments to the other areas of his life. So he eats better, of course, right? He's been eating better now for probably 12 years. And he does cardiovascular activity on his home elliptical. And then for his 75th birthday, which was this past November, we worked up to a 3-minute plank. Now, a 3-minute plank maybe isn't earth-shattering, but for a 75-year-old, previous non-athlete to do a 3-minute plank on his 75th birthday, I think that's a huge victory. And to be fair, like I think a lot of people who I speak to who are 45 to 55, they will sit there and go like, oh, well, I'm 54 now. And I'm like, dude, I got a 75-year-old who's looking to whip
Right.
you, kid. Like that's not that old. But we have to make sure the inputs are lined up.
And I kind of get that. One of the people I talked with was a ballet dancer, a male ballet dancer. And one of the things that I've lost over the years, I was very, very flexible when I was younger, like into my teens. I was very, very flexible. All that flexibility is gone. Now I'm trying to get it back, and it's hard. Only because we talked about how when you're younger, your bones and your muscles and all that, they're a little bit softer, so you're able to get that flexibility easy when you're younger. But I was flexible up until I was 13, 14. Then I got busy, but all of that flexibility that I've had is now gone, and I'm slowly trying to get it back. But it's one of the most difficult things that I think I'm having to accomplish. And I think with the training, one of the things that I noticed now that I'm in my 40s, I mean it's very, very easy for me to lose weight and gain weight. I mean, I can lose and gain 30 pounds within a 6-month period. I mean, it's go down 30 pounds and go up 30 pounds in a 6-month period. It's that easy for me. But the thing with me was I'm kind of like Gumby, where like skinny fat and all that stuff. So at one point I was in fairly decent shape. I had a trainer when I was in my mid-20s. Very, very easy for me to get in shape. I ate right. I took the creatine and the glutamine, and I followed his nutrition plan and was doing the workouts. And in 6 months, I mean, it was a complete 180. Of course, I lost it, but then now I'm slowly getting it back. But it's now much more difficult now that I'm in my 40s. But at least I've obtained I've gotten some muscle, some of the muscle that I'm trying to get, but also I'm educating myself to the point where as if you're trying to build muscle and bulk, if you want to call it that, you're also going to gain some fat, and then you're going to have to sort of cut it, and it's sort of like that. It's sort of like it's a game. It's some sort of game that you're playing with your body, and I'm learning about that more and more. And I think it's just like Candy Crush level 700 and something. That's what I'm comparing it to when it comes to aging and working out. And it kind of brings me to my next topic, and it's been kind of in my head because I've been hearing about it from various people. I mean, 40 is a significant age where where men are supposed to focus on their health even more, certain tests, colonoscopies, all that stuff. But one of the things that I've heard about is testosterone replacement therapy. So, and that's usually something that may assist in people training over 40. So I kind of want to get your perspective as to how testosterone replacement therapy is utilized currently between the various age ranges. What are the benefits of that? What are the cons of that, and the right way to do it if we were to go to that approach? And is this something that you have done before?
Yeah, so like testosterone replacement therapy, for anybody who may not, know what it is really, is that we have a range of testosterone, or when you're measuring blood work, there's a range of testosterone that they want men to fall within. In America, I'm pretty sure it's something like 250 to 1100 or 300 to 1100. If you fall within that range, even though it's a giant range, generally your doctor will say, you're fine, no problem at all. But you could be in that lower range and feel like crap. I mean, you'll feel like crap because you might be the kind of person who is optimal at 600 or 700. Or you may be the kind of person who's below that range, and be assigned what's called testosterone replacement therapy. So generally, testosterone replacement therapy is you're prescribed some form of what's called an exogenous testosterone. So we make endogenous testosterone from our testicles through a little, some communication comes from our brain to make that happen, of course. But somewhere along the line, as you get older, you can be making less. And if you're making less and you're below that level and your doctor prescribes you testosterone replacement therapy, what they're generally trying to do is get your numbers back up into a range where you feel good. All your health markers continue to look as good as they can, and you'll be a little more vital. You'll have a little more virility. Your libido might go up. You might see a little muscle tissue gain. There's certainly lots of advantages of to having a more mid-range to optimal level of testosterone. Optimal being different for everybody, of course. I think that in some people, they see dramatic results when they get onto testosterone replacement therapy, and oftentimes that's because they may have been below the levels for a very long time and living sort of subpar. There are lots of people who get onto testosterone replacement therapy after they actually use testosterone and other steroids to get sort of dramatic performance enhancement, whether that be athletically or in the gym. And then afterwards, their body can no longer produce an ample amount of endogenous testosterone to allow them to have that sort of optimal range. So then they end up on testosterone replacement therapy. You asked another question, which was, sorry. So there was obviously the benefits are actually numerous, and I wish I could list them all. But realistically, one of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's a guy who's now quite popular on Instagram. He has a podcast and so on. And he said, testosterone at a physiological level makes effort feel good. And that's probably the best way that I can describe testosterone as well, is that if you have ample levels of testosterone, when you have to go and complete a task, or and that could be a physical task, maybe a mental task, there's less stress behind it, less feeling of stress behind it. And then often a better recovery, from actual physical activity. There can be downfalls. Primarily the biggest downfall is that if you, are injecting or using the patch, for example, testosterone into your body for a period of time, well, your own body stops production entirely. So then you become reliant entirely on the prescription that you have. And if you're the kind of person who's, every day you've woken up for the last 20 years, taking your multivitamin and, gone off to work, then it might be something that you're totally fine with. But for a lot of people, adherence and then, having that consistency, that longevity of adherence can be tough. And 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you may find man, I'm kind of tired of sticking this needle in my leg every 3 days, or my butt every 3 days. And so that's generally sort of the baseline lifestyle. What are the disadvantages? Is that once you're on it, you may have to be on it forever. You can come off of it. You can still come off of it, and your HPTA and your testicles will start reproduction, but they may not be able to bring the levels back up to anything that is a semblance of optimal. So there is that. There can be health impacts. They're not necessarily mortal. They're not it's not necessarily going to kill you, but they could over the long haul. Somebody might take testosterone replacement therapy and they might notice that their liver markers or that their cholesterol numbers can change. And then that's why you're working with a doctor, right? That's why you go, you've got a prescription, you work with a doctor, they're going to adjust your dosing to try and make sure all those markers are there. But it is something to be wary of or to be, knowledgeable in that there can be changes in some of your health markers. And the last question is, you were asking about me, and I've used testosterone replacement therapy for probably just about 4 years now. And the reason that I started with it was when I was in my early 30s, I had a really high testosterone level, just naturally, and I felt great. I felt very, very good. Obviously, I was young. I was a young guy and everything. But then between like running a business that had me waking up at 3:30 in the morning every day for 10 years, having 2 kids, raising 2 kids, all of these things, physically, I started to deteriorate. And that's actually noticeable. I know you're on my Instagram. I made a post the other day showing like what I look like in 2018
Yes.
versus 2023, and I made some dramatic changes. And the testosterone replacement therapy was one of them. It certainly, I don't think, was actually the biggest one. And there's going to be people who listen to this and people who watch this who are going to disagree with me. They're going to think like, well, testosterone makes you huge. It makes you whatever. But it's like legitimately the biggest change I had to make in that time was realize how fucking stressed I was and how much it was damn near killing me. And that the only way out of it was I had to acknowledge it and then make a change in my life. And one of those changes was going to the doctor, getting my blood test done, seeing that my testosterone in 7 years had plummeted.
Right.
And had to work our way back up into like a healthy level.
Yeah, so that's one of the challenges that I'm encountering. Well, you know that I'm going through this lawsuit thing right now, and I'm not working. One of the things, the issues about not working is not being insured. So I can't go to the doctor, have the appropriate tests, and do all this stuff. I want to make sure that if I decide to do this, I want to do it the right way. So I'm trying to research the avenues that I can take in order to still obtain what I would need to in order to have the right testing mechanisms, the right doctors, the right just the right tests in general to ensure that I do this the right way. The optimal way would be, to be insured and go to, a real healthcare provider that you know and trust and all that stuff. But I'm having to maneuver through various avenues to see what I can do, but also be as safe as possible while doing it. Like one of the things I'm not sure if you heard of PrEP, but it's like HIV prevention and all that stuff, and I never really took it. But there's this company called Hey Mister, and they test you for HIV, gonorrhea, and chlamydia, and they send you this kit to do testing at home by yourself, and you send the items back to them. And one of the benefits of that is great. I mean, I don't really have sex that often, but it's good to know. But one of the little metrics that they have is the creatinine levels. So that's like the additional level that I like to keep an eye on, and that's a free test right there. So now I'm trying to figure out all the free mechanisms and testings that I can do to get my cholesterol tested. I have a Fitbit right now that I'm testing and keeping track of. So I'm utilizing every tool that I can in order to do things correctly and keep an eye on everything. And plus, like I said, I train with my friend, and he's a trainer. The other thing that I love about training with him is I'm the type of person that I don't get offended very, very easily, and it takes a lot to piss me off. I'm pretty easygoing, but I'm the type where if I'm doing something wrong, he could like slap me in the back of the head and say, "Stop fucking up, do it this way," and then I'll get it. But that's sort of the reason why I try to have all these people who are knowledgeable in the fitness industry to have these chats with, but also to get different perspectives as to what to do, what to look for, and also why people are doing the things that they're doing in the way that they're doing it. But also, I think it's important for you have a family. And the people that I've chatted with before, they're younger, they're still, in their early 20s, but they don't have to worry about kids. thankfully,
Yeah.
and not just yet. But I think it's very, very important to have, somebody like you who is, working for themselves, but also maintaining a healthy lifestyle, training clients, but also having that family dynamic that is necessary, and kind of getting an idea as to how you work. And I think, as I talk about this, I think the next question is, may I ask how old your kids are?
Yeah, sure. I have a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter.
So I guess my question is, how are you instilling your knowledge as it comes to health and fitness? I kind of I'm figuring out what you do for nutrition, and I think I have a good stance on that. But I kind of want to gauge as to how you are instilling the knowledge of health and fitness to your kids.
Yeah. I'm so lucky. I'm lucky for lots of reasons, but like one of the reasons I'm lucky is that we actually homeschool our kids. So I spend a lot of time with my kids that not everybody has, the freedom to do. And then with that, I also have all of I have a gym at home. I have my full gym here. So my children get to see me exercising because they get to come in the gym while I'm doing my thing. So number one, it's like just by example. I'm just by example. My children get to be present while I'm doing things. I let them lift the weights or pull in the cables and do some little things that are, sort of safe and light so they can get movement in. And we'll talk about it sometimes during those periods. But it's something that's actually brought up quite often in our conversations. The same way that we might talk about math, we're going to talk about movement, right? The same way that we might talk about like them learning French, we're going to talk about nutrition. And so it's like it's trying to instill all of the like curriculum-based education we have to put into them, while at the same time trying to fill them with this life knowledge. And so I try and express, especially like fitness, like exercise, as a sort of prerequisite to life. That like exercising is something that you do, and the kids love to laugh and say like, "Oh, we got to get mommy exercising. Like we got to get mommy exercising," And it's like they're doing that not out of some sort of thing to shame her. It's that they're like, "Oh yeah, exercise is something you do." The same as you brush your teeth and you floss your teeth, and that's how I try and present it to them. Is that it's a fun activity. You can find whatever sport or movement opportunity that you like. It doesn't have to be lifting weights necessarily, but you must do something to move. And so we do that with like recreational sports as well. Like, hey, maybe soccer isn't your favorite sport, but like this summer we got to pick a sport for you to do because you've got to do something. Yeah. And then hopefully one time, right, they'll find something and it catches, and then they'll be off to the races.
Yeah, and with the homeschooling thing, I'm kind of in agreement with you. If I do have, I plan on having kids before I'm 50, or at least one kid before I'm 50. I'm too selfish right now, and I have other things going on. But I'd imagine that I would homeschool them, only for a plethora of reasons based on what I'm seeing right now, and I'm not even going to get into that discussion. But when it comes to me, I'm a math and science guy. I can teach that and even go into advanced stuff with them. And I'd imagine I had this conversation with my friend. I said, these kids and their technology, playing video games all the time, on their phone all the time, on their iPad, I would limit that to such an extent, and try to ensure that they're doing all these different activities, whether it be outside, a sport, a music, art, something, just something that I never really got to have when I was a kid. I was a violinist growing up too, and I had to beg my mom. We couldn't afford it, but I had to beg my mom to start violin. But it turned out that I was very, very good at it. Played all through college. Nice. And as she progressed in her career, and she was making more money, I was able to do more stuff. So I did swimming, I did track, just to try different things out. But it was so late for me. I was doing this in this high school, so I would imagine that when I have kids, I would try to get them in there as early as possible so that they can sample all these little different different cuisines and athletics and arts and all that stuff to kind of pick out what they want. But the homeschooling thing, I mean, I think honestly, anybody who has the benefit of teaching their kids at home, I mean, that's just fantastic. And for so many reasons, and this is not a political discussion, so I'm not touching it.
No,
But
no, no, I get
but
it.
but I think it's very very necessary these days to uh, instill certain values that you want to instill in your kids, especially when it comes to fitness and health. And I'm not even sure if health and fitness is a requirement in the homeschooling curriculum, and maybe you can answer that question.
So the homeschooling curriculum, excuse me, is different sort of all across the US. It's different all across Canada. So where we live, there's actually no like we're not prescribed any curriculum at all. And then we basically pick and choose various curriculums that are available to maximize the different subjects that we want our kids obviously to learn, given the age and grades that they are supposed to be in. And then we can have this extracurricular, basically, educational piece, which would be like the health, the fitness, the nutrition, the wellness. Like those are things that are important to us, and those are core family values for us. So we have the core family values, and then we have the actual stuff we need to make sure that they know and learn and become good at to become fully functional, like adults in society. And so we're lucky. We're lucky where we are because we don't have to have this massive oversight, which would limit our ability to teach in the way we want to. So all of the regular subjects, we teach probably the way that they're taught anywhere else. And then we get to have this freedom on the other side where we can teach our kids art and music and language in a way that fits like our life and the life in the area that we live. And so yeah, we're very very lucky. Yeah, it's obviously not for everybody. We actually don't do it for any sort of religious or political reasons. We made a decision early, basically right when the pandemic started, because kids were out of school. And I just said to my wife, I said, look, I said, the whole year's fucked. So why don't we try something new? Why don't we experiment with something, And my wife is like this incredibly smart and bright and capable person. So she deep dived into it. And every year we just say like, okay, are we going to do it next year? Like we just go 1 year at a time. We get the question a lot, like, how long are you going to do this for? And I'm always like, I don't know. The answer, like the kids will tell us, like we will know, and we do ask our kids, like this fall, like, do you want to go to school? Do you want to go to school and be with other kids? And as it stands now, they enjoy the formula we have, and we actually, because we live in a rural community, and there's quite a few people who actually homeschool. So we have like a large group of families and other kids that we get to be with every day or every couple of days to have that connection with other people, obviously, along with like recreational sports. Like there's all this socialization that's occurring, and at the end of the day, it does feel good to have a little more control. But with control comes a responsibility that is intense and takes time.
Right. And with me, I'm not sure if you know this, but I'm finishing up my PhD in computational math. So that's
Damn,
yeah,
really?
that's my background. So my background is in the math behind artificial intelligence. And I deal with a lot of images and videos and all that stuff. And that's kind of how my brand was founded, because certain
Right.
shapes and images, they kind of related to my PhD research. So I made that correlation there. But when we talk about uh, uh, math and science, I mean, if I have kids, I would be geeking out with them on that. But the physical fitness stuff, I mean, if I had to, I would hire trainers for them if they wanted it. I would let them do whatever sport that they want to, because I think it's very very important to, again, have that sort of interaction with kids that are not related to you, only by relation all the time, or just the neighbors. I think it's very very important to have that sort of diverse experience that you get from socialization, by doing various activities. And that's kind of like one of the regrets that it's not really a regret, but it's something that I wished for when I was younger that I really wasn't privy to. And I think if we had certain benefits when I was a kid, I think I would have probably had a more healthier lifestyle. I would have been, training, growing up, and caring about those sort of things. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But at least, now I'm at a certain level in my career and my education where I am able to slowly transition my mental state into that sort of healthy sort of mentality. And plus, hitting 40, that's sort of like a midlife crisis age, almost. So it kind of works out. But I think it's very, very important to when it comes to health and fitness and seeing what I missed when I was a kid. I think it's great to introduce it to the kids as early as possible, because I think it instills not only just being healthy, but it gives you a sort of discipline that I think is not really taught in any other way unless you were kind of focused on it. If you want to get good at something, you have to practice at it. So I think adding that sort of physical activity, whether it just be bodybuilding, weightlifting, or a sport, I think it is a nice little fun challenge for any kid to have. And however it's taught, and whenever it's taught while they're young, I think it's a great benefit. So if you enjoyed the part 1 of this interview and like to see the next part, feel free to like, subscribe, comment on this video. We are on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts, and we hope to see you on the next one. Cheers.